This Week in Agribusiness. Our special Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pioneer. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. And yes, it's a different setting than you're accustomed to. It's a little different for us with our special Christmas show. Mr. Samuelson, year after year, you've helped spread holiday cheer with this broadcast, and we've done it from a number of different locations, haven't we?
We have done it from quite a few different churches because we did 2 or 3 or 4 in Wisconsin. We did some in Illinois. I think we did one in Nebraska, as I recall, and every one of them different, but very, very suited to the season.
As we recall going to those churches, those congregations put a lot of effort into their Christmas programs. The choirs practiced for many, many weeks ahead of the arrival of Orion Samuelson and the crew.
And always delivered a great musical Christmas show that we could enjoy with their choirs and the concerts and so on. And I had the opportunity to host the show for Christmas at our church in Huntley, Illinois, and they still ask about it and still talk about it.
That country church is such an important location, and you know, many have struggled, of course, in this year of the pandemic. It has been a real challenge, even in rural communities away from the big cities.
Well, the county fairs and the state fairs that lost so much attendance and business in those communities, and the churches that we were able to feature across the country, and still get comments from people at the churches that we featured on This Week in Agribusiness.
Did that for many, many years, by all means.
Yes, we started, I think, in the early 60s because I grew up in a small country church, 60 members. And, you know, for me, it was the spiritual and the social center of activity. And so I decided they don't get much attention beyond their congregation. So whatever the year was we started, it was to every week feature a country church. And the one thing I regret is I didn't print a book with all of the photos and all of the features. I could have made $1 million.
That would have been magnificent. You know, one thing that always occurred to me as we put those country churches in the spotlight, how many of them had been destroyed by fire over the years? How many of the structures of the church? But it was a reminder of how long those congregations had been out there in the countryside. And quite often that steeple was the highest point where the bolt of lightning would hit. But we always saw them rebuild, again reminding us that the church was the congregation and not the structure.
Absolutely, and I hope we told that story very well.
Oh, I think so. You remember, of course, growing up, and in the church we had to learn our piece,
the piece
for the Christmas
yes.
program.
Do you know your piece, Orion? Yeah. And I'll bet you got asked the same question.
Oh, yes, it was drilled. I mean, not only at Sunday school, but at home as well. But that Christmas program at the church was something I think most of us have never forgotten and recall with a real warmness in the heart. We cherish those days.
We really did. And of course, I grew up on a farm home without electricity. When young people today say, what's the biggest change in technology you've experienced in your lifetime? I know the date, April 11th, 1946, when the REA hooked us up to electricity. I could hit a switch at the bottom of the stairway and my bedroom on the second floor would light up, and had a milking machine and a refrigerator, and my mother threw the hot irons away that used to sit on top of the stove. And yeah, it changed life totally.
I think that's one thing we'll talk about a little bit later in this broadcast. The lights of Christmas, they're so noticeable out in rural areas. You know, there's all of the light pollution of the big cities, of course, understandably, from the street lights and the lights of the billboards. But you get into rural areas, And the lights of Christmas are visible in many instances for miles and miles. That point on top of the grain elevator or the courthouse in a rural community. There's something neat about that.
And flying the airplane over rural America at Christmas time, that's how you identified farms and where the buildings were, because you could see the Christmas lights from the airplane very well.
You flew that plane, you went into many communities you wouldn't have had the chance to otherwise. And one thing I noticed when you visited these country churches, it was so obvious to me that they welcomed you so warmly. It was a special event in many of those towns to have Ori and Samuelson and the crew come to town. Even our crew watched their language a little bit, Orion.
Yeah,
I
they
noticed
did.
that.
Which was good. I was glad to see that. But yes, I'm overwhelmed now with the mail that I'm getting on finally wrapping it up after 60 years. But yeah, they take you as a member of the family. And we'd go to visit the farms and so on. They'd invite us in for an apple pie and a cup of coffee and have a good old-fashioned visit.
Isn't that something you've enjoyed most over your career, that personal contact with farmers and ranchers? And it's been a struggle, obviously, this year for us because we've not been able to be in quite the close contact that we've always enjoyed and appreciated. But think of all of the homes into which you have been welcomed as if you were a member of the family.
Oh, indeed. I think they considered me a member of the family because they'd call their neighbors to come in and have a cup of coffee. I think, you know, just to see you or to see me rather than sell us a cup of coffee.
Traveling down the road one time, the headlights went out on our vehicle, and my wife said, "What are we going to do now?" It was about 10 o'clock at night. And I said, well, within about a 3-mile radius of where we were at that moment, I know 4 farm families, and they would welcome us in. The first thing they would do would be to offer that cup of coffee and a piece of pie, and then the next thing would be, oh yeah, we'll fix those lights in the morning. There's something neat about that, isn't there?
There really is, and the way that farmers and ranchers found to decorate their farmsteads at Christmas time made them readily visible from the air, probably more so than from a car driving alongside the farm.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later because it occurred to me in recent weeks as I saw text messages coming to me with Christmas decorations, as I saw posts in the social media, as there were lights emailed to me. Several farmers pointed out these lights were up for the first time on their farmsteads. We'll talk about that a little bit later on here on our special edition of Christmas on This Week in Agribusiness. Oh yeah, we'll get a little education on how poinsettias are produced, how they bring color to the home. That'll be coming up next here on This Week in Agribusiness. Well, coming up here on This Week in Agribusiness, we'll share a visit with one of Santa's helpers, but he's also an FFA advisor. First of all, let's find out a little bit about the production of poinsettias. In so many homes across America, well, and around the world, they make our homes beautiful, but it's a rather complex process to get them produced, as Mike Pearson shares with us.
Thanks, Max. Well, the holidays are upon us, and I know a lot of us have great memories dating back to holidays from years ago, and a lot of times those memories can be brought back with simple things like the smell of a Christmas tree or the sight of a bright red poinsettia. We wanted to learn more about poinsettias this Christmas season, so we came to talk to Bob Colsey of Colsey's Corner Gardens.
I've been here 23 years, and I have the unique opportunity to grow my own product in the greenhouse business. And so what we're doing is we're standing here amongst the poinsettias. My job is to actually take the cutting, they're very small, July 13th, from the breeders and grow it on, from little on.
So when the cuttings show up here at Colsey's Corner Gardens, they're a few inches tall, an
like
inch
my
tall.
little finger, like 2 inches.
And what time of the year do they typically come for you?
They're planted exactly July 13th, and it takes us about 5 months. They're ready about November 20th.
And I understand with poinsettias, there's some very special things that have to take place in order to get them blooming and looking great at Christmas time.
That's correct. So for instance, we have to get them off to a really good start. It's really hot in here in summer because it's summer, and we got to get them off to a good start, get them rooted up, and then they require acidic feeding. So we give them acidic feeding, but then September 21st is the first day of fall. We have to make sure that they have full light during the day and complete darkness on a natural day length.
So now, in addition to poinsettias, here at Colsey's Corner Gardens, you guys do a lot of different stuff for the holidays.
We do. I've been in the Christmas tree business since I was born. My dad started right before I was born, and so I've always been around it. And in the years, it's evolved that the demand can be high, the demand can be low, depending on economy, depending on the weather. So right now, today, the last 5-10 years, we've been making our own wreaths and making our own garlands so we can bring it to the market fresh to the people walking in.
So when people see those fresh wreaths hanging around for the holiday season, what's the process like to get one made? What do you start with?
Well, I'm just going to start with really good boughs that are stout and fresh, and my job is to cut boughs. I cut boughs and shape them. I shape them almost like a fan, and then we just fit the fan into the wreath frame, and we clamp it and primp it and just make it just right. You know, if I was to say one thing that's really, I gotta say, heartfelt, is that there's so much sadness right now, and we're at this place where it kind of ramps up and then it goes back and it ramps up. To be able to safely deliver the Christmas tree and the wreaths, people are like, they need some joy. To deliver that, and they could actually celebrate that piece of Christmas, that little piece, and try to get that piece back of joy, because it's scarce right now, depending on who that person is. So I feel like this blessed person that could be part of their Christmas and part of that process. So, yeah.
Making a return to normalcy in
We're trying.
Christmas season.
We're trying, or yeah.
You can find poinsettias at retail shops across the country this time of year, but you can also find them from local organizations that sell them to raise money. FFA is one such group, and we wanted to talk to one FFA chapter who's been doing it for years. We're here in Newark, Illinois, home of the Newark FFA chapter. We're talking to Joe Steffen, chapter advisor. Joe, we're standing amongst some beautiful poinsettias here in your greenhouse. Tell us a little bit about where they come from. Where do they start the journey?
When we get our poinsettias, we get them about mid-September. They're already pre-finished for us, so they've already gone through the dark period that they need to go ahead and start blooming. And students go ahead and we raise out the poinsettias till the time they're ready to sell. Most of our buyers are from the community, but we do sell a lot to churches. I would say 75% of our poinsettias will end up in churches around the community, and probably within a 30-mile radius of us. The money that we raise from the poinsettias go back into our greenhouse. Our greenhouse is sufficient here at our high school, and it goes in for buying potting soil, pots, and everything for our spring bedding plant sale, as well as our mum sales in the summer and early fall.
Now, it really sounds like Newark's a great community, both to teach ag in and to raise kids. Are there any special holiday festivities here in Newark that folks like to take part in?
Yeah, in 2001 we have a lighted fire truck parade that's been going on since 2001, and with that the fire trucks from neighboring towns, we've had as many as 20 communities come to the lighted fire truck parade. Of course, Santa makes an appearance at during the parade also, but with that, the community comes together at the firehouse. The Boy Scouts sell wreaths and greens. We sell poinsettias there. The bank has some activities for the kids to do. The library, the church, the blacksmith shop is open for people to see. So it's time for the whole community to come together and spend a night together with that.
Joe, you mentioned Santa Claus, and I've got to say, with that beard, you look kind of familiar this holiday season.
You mean this? Merry Christmas.
So you're not just Joe Steffen, you're also Santa Claus. How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing Santa Claus for 32 years.
Had you just always liked Santa Claus, or did people tell you that you looked like Santa Claus?
Yeah, it was something I just kind of fell in. It was something I kind of wanted to do, but yet didn't know quite how to do it. Of course, I didn't have the beard when I was 18 years old and everything, so that's why the fake beard always came about. And once I got into it, then got into it a little bit more and more, and now it's a pretty good business for me.
When you think about your history as Santa Claus, are there any special memories that jump out that give you reason to keep going?
Oh yeah, you always have those. You always have the kids that, especially when a kid looks at you, you know, and they're looking at you as you are the real Santa Claus. You know, with that always brings up memories, a lot of different memories, because that and you ignite some non-believers going back into believers again, and that's always special too.
So Joe, you're not just Santa out in public. I understand your home also has a little bit of the Christmas spirit.
Just a little bit. We got 125,000 lights hooked up to 246 channels that plays the Christmas music. When people drive up, they can listen to the Christmas music and watch the lights from their cars.
How long have you been decorating?
We've been doing computerized Christmas lighting for 15 years now. This will be our 16th year, but I've always decorated ever since I was in high school.
How long does the lighting display take to get set up each year?
This year it seemed like it took a little bit longer because we set up a Halloween display because for COVID reasons. It took a while to tear that down and put the Christmas up, but I always start the day after Halloween with the Christmas and turn the lights on Black Friday. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Did you catch that? 125,000 lights. Oh, it appears that Santa's helper is pretty busy there during this holiday season. Out across the heartland, the spirit of Christmas is very much alive and well, we found. We traveled out to the rural counties of northern Kansas and visited 2 different communities, talking with them about how they celebrate the holiday season. Join us as we go there, coming up. Well, as Orion and I visited a little bit earlier, through the years, we have been guests in a number of rural churches for their Christmas celebrations. It's been a very special time for us. And we've enjoyed their observance of Christmas through their music ministry. Such was the case when we went to the United Methodist Church in Batavia, Illinois, as their chancel choir performed, "O Come All Ye Faithful." hymns of Christmas never get old when they are performed so superbly, it seems, as was the case when we went to Orion's home church in Huntley, Illinois, the Shepherd of the Prairie Lutheran Church, as the choir performed Silent Night. Still to come, we'll take you across the heartland of the country where again Christmas is alive and well. We'll go to northern Kansas as our special edition of the broadcast continues. This week in Agribusiness. Our special Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pioneer. Welcome back to this special edition of This Week in Agribusiness, our Christmas edition. The town of Sabetha, Kansas, zip code 66534, is home to only about 3,000 people. That's about the same as its population 100 years ago. But there are some 5,000 jobs in Sabetha, thanks to some manufacturing operations, including KSI, a well-known supplier of conveyors and seed treating equipment. While in Sabetha, we visited with Paul Cabe and Joan Cabe. Paul is the Chief Executive Officer of KSI.
I worked 25 years at a local community here that had really good culture. And I worked with the original owners of that company. And it really meant a lot for me to sit across the table or across the desk from the original owners, and I learned a lot from them. And when I had the opportunity to start KSI, which was 20 years ago, that was one thing that I desire to bring back into a new business is I'm just a person. If God goes ahead of us and He opens the door for us and we all just plug together and pull together, He's the one that's going to grant the blessings and grant the increase. And I think and I hope, like you say, I hope our customers feel that, and I really believe they do. I think that makes all the difference in the world, to be there for them and to have a culture that the employees want to come to work and want to enjoy what they're doing.
Having spent just a short time in Sabetha, Kansas this fall, we wondered what Christmas is like there. Joan Cabe explained that for us.
I think it's very festive for a small town. I grew up in a big town and I just never even thought too much about town and making it as Christmassy as it is here in Sabetha. I just think it's very pretty. It's a short little, 4 or 5 blocks, but they put up the lights and the stores really decorate their windows. It looks very pretty.
They always have a good open Friday, that all the neighbors come in. It's kind of you really find yourself going there and just having a great community gathering. Everybody.
Santa Claus comes to town during this time, and
they serve popcorn and snacks and some traditions that different stores had when they were kids. So you kind of go in and out and get to eat things. It's just, I don't know, it's a very festive time. And they also have a couple horses that pull a horse-drawn buggy up and down that give free rides. So it gets you in the Christmas spirit, that's for sure.
I noted from our visit there along Main Street in Sabetha, Kansas, USA, the merchants seem to be doing okay right now.
The stores in town, it's always a challenge to keep the local stores going, but that one thing that has happened in Sabetha, there's been enough industry in town that has kept the street well maintained. I mean, the sidewalks are in good shape. They got some new street lamps. They always put up Christmas decorations. The city does really well at making it look like Christmas, and especially if you get a little snow along with it, it really seems like Christmas that we really enjoy. And I think a lot of people miss that in the rural America.
And the observance of the holiday in the Cabe family, what's Christmas like for them?
We have Christmas Eve services, and most of them do here. We've always enjoyed our Christmas Eve service that we go. We have a Christmas service where we do some singing and the Christmas melodies, and then a short message on Christ and His birth. And then we everybody, they pass out these little electric candles. They went to electric now. They used to be actual flame candles, but they went to electric candles. And then at the end, the whole church shuts the lights out except for those, and we sing Silent Night. And that's always, it's just kind of a good reflection of what Christ did. To me, Christmas season, without knowing the purpose of it, you kind of really can lose the meaning in a hurry. Now, we're not against Santa Claus. I always dress up as Santa Claus for my grandkids. We want to share the joy of it, and then really just what happens, that we have the opportunity to know why Christ came. That's really the gift that is the gift that never stops giving.
Listening to the Cabes describe their family, their church, their community, it makes you want to come back to that town of Sabetha, Kansas sometime to really sample once more what these folks have in rural Kansas.
This community really has strong family values. I say where the family values go, so goes the traditions, and as long as we can have the family values and see that children have the desire to see the value of coming together in community and relationships, that's what it's all about. And that lingers into our life walk too. We aren't in this life except to serve and give to others, and that's what Christ did for us. So in that respect, it's what we can give back.
Our time spent in Sabetha, Kansas was very enjoyable, to be sure. To go into the plant where Paul and his employees work, they welcomed us in there. And I asked Paul about his wish for the holiday season. He said it was his hope that maybe during this season of Christmas that we would all come together a little bit. As Paul put it in his conversation with me, he says, God made us all different, to be sure, but maybe for a period of time here, we can realize that there are these commonalities that connect all of us, and maybe that would be one outcome of this Christmas season. There's more coming up on This Week in Agribusiness. We're so happy you joined us for this special edition of This Week in Agribusiness, this Christmas edition. In northern Kansas, as we went west from Sabetha, we came eventually to the town of Marysville. That's the community where you find the black squirrels. And yes, we saw some while in town. You also notice when you get into Marysville, it's hard to miss that this is home of Landall Incorporated. And we had the opportunity to visit with Don Landall, the Chief Executive Officer. I asked him what the Christmas season is like in Marysville.
There's lots of Christmas programs, there's band programs. We have a choir that gets together, adults from all faiths get together and sing, put an afternoon choir sing on, a couple hours of singing with treats, to keep people mingling. Amongst them, all faiths could be getting together, and we're very supportive of funerals because a town of this size, most everybody knows, a lot of cross references when it comes to church funerals and all.
Don Landall visited with us in the beautiful church where his family worships, St. Gregory the Great Catholic Church, a pillar in this community for some 150 years, and now with an altar that itself has a rich history from a very different location. In fact, it was found on the internet.
My right-hand man got on the internet and he found this altar, and so it was from the Newark, New Jersey area, but it was in a church that had would put on a historic register, and it was a tougher part of town, obviously, and they didn't have money to fix the leaking roof and that, and they were allowed to tear it down and move it into a church warehouse down in Atlanta, so that we found it in Atlanta. And it was actually carved in 1857, I believe, over in Austria. And the statues and that you see there are all a tree. And when we moved it and put it up, you could lay the tree over. And of course, the old farmers were counting the circles to see how old the trees were that they carved the statues out of. So that was fun. We're quite proud of it.
I remarked during my conversation with Don there in his church that I had heard Marysville, Kansas is a well-churched community. They have a bunch of them.
There's a lot of people of faith, and that's very interesting. I think we got either 16 or 17 different churches represented here in our community. The German Lutherans are very strong, and they got multiple churches, not just in town, they've only got one, but you can go 10 miles to the west and go by 6 or 7 German country churches yet, and all active.
But with 16 or 17 churches, it's in a town of much less than 5,000, right?
Yeah, 3,200. So
that's high participation per capita, isn't it?
That's high participation per capita. And of course, the COVID thing has certainly not helped any of us, but thanks to your line of work, there's a lot of cable TV is allowed a lot of stations to broadcast, and I think most of them they broadcast for free that went on them. Some of the churches, I know they bought the FM low wattage so they could broadcast out in their parking lots, and people could tune in over their FM radios.
I asked Don Landall to reminisce a little bit, to recall some of those Christmases of his youth, all of those years ago in rural Kansas.
It was big. And I grew up in in Hanover, Kansas, and Hanover is obviously a German name. One reason I say it was so much bigger, large families, and Christmas was a time you got a gift. We got a new pair of clothes on on Christmas. We got a pair for our birthday, and we got a pair of jeans when we started school, you know, in the fall. But that, you didn't think of buying clothes in between time in my era, because, you know, our folks just, wherewithal wasn't there. But it was real common. And then the church services were in my early days as an older boy, why things were in Latin, and so it was much different than now. But then we spent more time in church than we do today.
Don said their family always had a Christmas tree when he was growing up. They would go out to the pasture and cut it from a part of the pasture that might have been a little more sheltered from those prairie winds, that the tree would be a little fresher that way. I talked with Don about the faith of folks in rural areas and the people like Landau Manufacturing who serve them. I said, you have to be of strong faith, don't you?
There's been some major challenging times. And, you know, through our business career, fortunately, I've been diversified from, you know, we were diversified on the farm. That was a must to survive on the farm with 8 children and less than a half section of land to farm. But, you know, we all got along. Of course, it took us much longer. And then we got into the welding shop, and, you know, it was a welding, radiator, and blacksmith shop. So the diversification was there, you know, to get through the winter. You know, and radiators and plowshares, it was much better income than welding was, because a lot of people could weld at that, you know, in that era, and more so than they do today, I think. And so, yes, but, you know, as we went through the last 56 years, we've seen some major ups and downs. And fortunately, we've found ways to go through them all.
What a treat it was to be in Marysville, Kansas, USA. Thanks to Don Landau and his family and his employees for making us feel so welcome during our short time there. Doggone it, we want to go back someday. Well, there's a town in Michigan that really puts Christmas in the forefront, and it puts that town on the map. We'll take you there to the store where you can buy everything Christmas. And a little bit later on, we'll get the story from a farmer about how he put his star up on the silo all of those years ago. Stay with us here on our Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness. Well, as we continue our travels in the pursuit of the Christmas spirit here on This Week in Agribusiness, we take you to Michigan, to Brommer's Christmas Wonderland. We went there a few years ago to see that Christmas store. Jamie Johansson shares it with us.
Bronner's Christmas Wonderland is considered the world's largest Christmas store. Founder Wally Bronner's journey has always been centered around Christ and decorating lives with peace and love.
Well, believe it or not, he didn't have an original thought to open up a Christmas store. He was a sign painter and window trimmer, and he was doing window displays at a business in Bay City, Michigan, and he was trimming the windows, and some merchants from Clare, Michigan came in that day and asked the hardware store owner if he knew where they could buy Christmas decorations for their city. And the hardware store owner said, "Boy, I really don't know, but why don't you go ahead and ask the window trimmer?" And so that got my dad thinking, maybe there's some cities that would like some Christmas decorations. So he did kind of a market research study and toured some cities and found out that there definitely was a need for that. And so that's how the story all got started.
Wally Bronner, the founder, and his wife have 4 children. Maria, the youngest sibling, said the 3rd generation has already started following in their grandfather's footsteps and attracting those customers worldwide.
He was always good at listening to his customers, and it started out, like I said, as kind of a display business more so in a sign shop. And then he opened up the home division and sold some giftware and a few ornaments. And as the demand kind of grew, it eventually grew into 3 different stores. Once we outgrew all that space, we moved to this big site here in 1977. You can find everything from nativities to ornaments to collectibles to lights to Christmas trees, personalized ornaments, stockings, wreaths. I'm missing things, but I know we have it. Advent calendars.
With over 6,000 styles of ornaments, half sold are Bronner's very own unique designs. They cover religions, food, farming, and any hobby or motif you can think of. The biggest question I had was how they instilled that Christmas spirit 361 days a year.
Growing up in the family, I don't know any different, first of all, because it's always been Christmas year-round. And when Christmas comes, it's still different because you have all the decorations all over the city and people's homes, of course, all the holiday baking and festivities and whatnot. So when Christmas comes, it's still easy to be excited. And well, of course, we play the Christmas music year-round, and you can catch the guests whistling to Merry Christmas during the months of June, July, August even. So it seems like once they get here, they kind of go back to the nostalgia and the warm feelings of Christmas, and it's not hard to have a Christmas store year-round, really. It just kind of fits.
Bronner's might play Christmas jingles year-round, but the big jolly fellow makes his appearance after Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much, Jamie. We appreciate it. When you see a place like that, the traditions of Christmas come to mind. Frankenmuth, Michigan. I want to get back there someday. Speaking of traditions, that star up on top of the silo in rural Missouri is one of those. We'll get the story from the farmer who put it up there. Stay with us. On some farms, that landmark outside, lit up during the holiday season, is a big tradition, to be sure. And that was the case on Richard Brand's farm in northwest Missouri. His son, Tom Brand, executive director for the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, gives us some of the history for the star 9 stories above the farmland on top of the silo.
A silo, sitting atop a hill a few miles south of Hopkins, Missouri. The tower my dad, Richard Brand, built over 45 years ago as his farm grew and prospered.
We were feeding cattle, so we were interested in a silo.
When a contractor came through offering to build him one, Dad went to a meeting.
I told him if I can climb it, I'll buy it. I climbed it, no problem at all, so that's how I ended up buying the silo.
It just simply gave him a better way to store grain.
When we were using it, it's great feed. The feed that you get out of there, you could almost eat yourself.
In some ways, the story of the silo became the story of his farm. It towered over acres and acres.
88 foot to the square. It's pretty tall. When you get up on there, you can see a long ways. You can see most of this farm.
And really, it became a local landmark.
People noticed it because it, sitting up here on the side hill.
And this silo stood out. But a few years later, he added something unique, something that stands out even more this time of the year.
We put a star up there.
It's simple in its design, about 5 foot across, a 5-pointed metal frame covered in Christmas lights.
We just carried her up. We just pulled it up by the extension cord and then dropped the cord back down to feed electricity.
The shining star beamed for miles over our farm.
It's noticeable from a distance.
Well, if it had been a landmark before, it became its own attraction. The first thing kids and grandkids would see twinkling in the distance when they came home for Christmas. It appeared in my kids' drawings, in artwork, in photos, and even Christmas cards.
It got to be pretty popular there for a while. Everybody's interested in getting it up. Getting it lit and making sure that the bulbs are all there.
And every now and then a bulb does break or a wire goes bad, and someone in the family makes that 90-foot climb to the top to get it all shining bright again.
Somebody else climbs it now. I don't have enough wind to climb it.
But every Christmas it still shines, a symbol of joy to the world and the family that grew out of Richard Brand's farm, even though the silo stands empty today.
I suppose it'll be there as long as it stays in one piece. As long as it's there, the star will be there.
For This Week in Agribusiness, Tom Brand, Hopkins, Missouri.
Thank you, Tom Brand, for sharing this story. Well, the footnote to that story is that back in the spring, some of the folks driving down the road near the Brand farm might have noticed at the end of May that the star was lit then for a period of about 5 days, because Mr. Richard Brand passed away, and the family members thought it would be a fitting tribute to him. Now in recent days, I hear the star has been refurbished, and for this season it may be brighter than ever for those folks in northwest Missouri. It was interesting in recent days, I received so many text messages from farmers, email messages showing me pictures of their holiday lights in places where they never had them before. There seemed to be among farmers and ranchers that need to spread a little bit of light in the darkness, maybe at the end of this year more than ever before. Thank you so much for being with us on this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. On behalf of Orion Samuelson and the great team we work with, we say to you, Merry Christmas.
You've been watching our special Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness. It's been brought to you by ADM.